I don't have one yet, but I should.
You and me both.
All right. Last time we finished the Cologne cosmological argument, which uses scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe and the logic of that everything that begins to exist has a cause, to show that the cause of the universe logically is God. Is there any questions about that before we begin?
I have 8 million questions,
8 million
and there's
questions.
too many. I just need to really,
Type out a big email.
I know. You'd have to reteach the class. I just need to go back and read and read over the stuff
It
you
really
sent us.
does help to read the chapter in the book, because then you can say, okay, I remember when he said that. And then sometimes it's one of those things, it's very dense reading, even though it's written in an easier fashion than his big book.
Right.
So you have to
Tell
stop
me
and
the
think
name of the
about
book again and the author.
On Guard
Yeah,
by
I got
William
one.
Craig.
By who, Craig?
Yeah. He's got this.
By who? Oh. Oh, William, okay. You probably told us this in the beginning, and I totally, William Lane Craig. Okay.
It was
so
in one of those emails in the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it has this, and it has a study guide with it, if you want to get that.
Okay.
I think I need to turn myself down a little bit.
Yeah, we're pretty close.
This is what happens when you do everything by yourself.
So what were you doing?
In the nursery.
Oh.
It's the third Sunday, second Sunday.
All right. So today we're going to use the teleological argument of fine-tuning.
How do you spell that? Oh, there we go, okay. I thought that was from, okay, oh, sorry.
Teleological, there's a lot of different teleological arguments you can find. Today we're going to specifically talk about fine-tuning, but like you can find theological arguments for the existence of God as far as like intelligent design or something like that. It's basically something is so complex that it requires a designer type of argument.
In other words, if it was very simple, it could just
Yeah,
happen.
the idea that's, all right, so the classic teleological argument is that you're, walking down a beach and you see a watch or like a pocket watch in the sand, and you look at it and you know that nature didn't just cause that watch to be put there. Somebody designed it because it's too complex for it just to happen by accident. So that's a teleological, that's what that means. Today we're specifically going to be talking about the fine-tuning of our universe. Today, it has been stated by many different atheists, including one of the new atheist leaders, the late Christopher Hitchens, as this is the greatest argument for the existence of God, the fine-tuning of the universe. And it's not going to take very long to get through it, just because there's not very many objections to it. Almost all physicists see our universe as fine-tuned for life. For them to have an explanation of why it's fine-tuned, that's what we'll talk about, but they all see our observable universe as finely tuned for life. It's just not really up for argument. So, as we learned last time, scientific evidence tells us that the universe had a beginning, but did our current known universe have to come from such a beginning? I want you to think back when we discussed Leibniz's contingency argument, remember we discussed what it meant to exist contingently or necessarily. The universe exists contingently, as we can imagine the possibility of the universe existing differently than what it is right now. They say whenever our universe began, it was a war between antimatter and regular matter, and there was lots of explosions, and our universe didn't have to be the way it is right now. So that's why, because it could be a little bit different, it's possible that it could be a little bit different, then it doesn't exist the way it is right now necessarily. Okay? Does that make sense?
Keep going, let me get it.
So, I don't exist necessarily because my dad could have married another woman, or something could have happened to where I wasn't born, or my mother could have died while she was carrying me, and then I could have died. So I don't exist necessarily. And this world doesn't, require me to exist. For me to exist necessarily, I would have had to been here, and I would have to be the way that I am, no different. Every way that I am has to be like this. Okay? So that's what it means to exist necessarily. And the universe is not like that. We can imagine that one galaxy that's out there doesn't exist, or one more galaxy that's actually out there does exist, or certain stars, didn't go out of existence whenever they did, or there's a lot of stuff going on into the universe to where to think that it exists necessarily would almost require a better explanation. For it to happen exactly the way that it does. Does that explain it? So the universe exists contingently. So in fact, scientists have studied that the odds of a life-permitting universe coming into existence is very, very slim. And the conclusion is that our universe is finely tuned for life.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant, A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these and many other numbers have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence suggests that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
So, they just quote that, but it's in there. Heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. This is Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So, here is the argument. Premise number 1. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Premise number 2. It is not due to physical necessity or chance. And the conclusion, therefore, it is due to design. Now, what exactly do we mean by the fine-tuning of the universe? There's some constants and some quantities. Fine-tuning means that small deviations from the actual values of the constants, such as the gravitational constant, which are contained in physical laws of nature, and the actual values of physical quantities, such as the entropy level, would render the universe life prohibiting. You still writing? I can't tell. Good.
It's in the book.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So, here are some examples of constants and quantities that if they were off by a little bit, by one part, that life would not be possible. So, if the ratio of electrons to protons were different by 1 part in 10 to the power of 37, life would not be possible. If the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the force of gravity were different by 1 part in 10 to the power of 40th, then life would not be possible. If the expansion rate of the universe were different by 1 part in 10 to the power of 55, then life would not be possible. If the mass density of the universe were different by 1 part in 10 to the power of 59, then life would not be possible. In this one, they've actually changed it, the cosmological constant, and the video says to the 120th. They've since reduced that, like in the past month. They reduced that down to the power of 100. So, big difference.
A little more likely.
And finally, if the mass and energy were not evenly distributed to a precision of 1 part in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. So these are really, really, really big numbers. So let's just take the smallest value of 1 part in 10 to the power of 37. What does that actually look like? If you were to cover the entire North American continent in dimes, all the way up to the moon, a height of about 239,000 miles, then the pile of dimes from here to the moon on a billion other continents, the same size of North America. Paint 1 dime red and mix it into the billions of piles of dimes from the earth to the moon, from billions of different continents. Blindfold a friend and ask him to pick out 1 dime. The odds that he would pick the red dime are 1 part in 10 to the power of 37. And so, like 1 part in 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 123rd, that the big one, that's been compared to like the chances of a tornado going through a junkyard, and the result of all that disaster and its wake would leave a fully operational Boeing 747 jet.
That's a good one.
I like that.
So, I mean, that it's basically impossible, is what we're saying. That the idea of this happening by chance, it's basically impossible. It is these kinds of numbers which has caused several physicists to think about the possibility of a designer. One of my favorite quotes from a mathematical physicist and cosmologist, Frank Tipler. When I began my career as a cosmologist some 20 years ago, I was a convinced atheist. I never in my wildest dreams imagined that one day I would be writing a book purporting to show that the central claims of Judeo-Christian theology are in fact true, that these claims are straightforward deductions of the laws of physics as we now understand them. I have been forced into these conclusions by the inexorable logic of my own special branch of physics. So, I'll let you write. This is not in the book, so if you want to copy it down, it's fine.
But you're gonna send us the.
Yeah,
PowerPoint,
I'll send everything out.
so.
Just, but if you want to write it down, it's fine. Go ahead. So we'll talk about like some objections to it and the defense of it. So one objection is if the constants and quantities had different values than they do, then other forms of life might have evolved. Meaning like when they say like other forms of life, meaning like forms of life that we don't know about. So like other kinds of forms of life that we currently don't know about may have come into fruition. The response is no life would be possible, zero life would be possible if the universe were not finely tuned. We are not stating that different forms of life might have evolved. We are stating that such an evolution would be impossible. Life, when we say life, we mean that property of organisms that take in food, extract energy from it, grow, adapt to their environment, and reproduce. In the absence of fine-tuning, not even atomic matter or chemistry would exist, not to speak of planets where life might evolve. So that's what we're talking about. That when we say no life, we mean like not a different kind of form of life, like the idea of life is zero. That's what we're, so.
We wouldn't be here to be having this debate. in other
Right,
words.
like no kind of life.
So that's because, like the one piece that I caught on to in the video, that if, for instance, if the gravitational constant were different, that either the universe would expand too fast,
Mm-hmm.
so that I didn't understand what happened to that. I did understand that it would collapse in on itself.
Yeah, if it was too small, it was too small, it would collapse back on itself. If it was too large, the expansion rate would be too fast for like planets to form and stuff like that.
So you could take each of those constants and there would be a logic similar to what you just said about why if this constant is off by that part,
Yeah.
then this would happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wouldn't be like the expansion rate, it would be something different.
Right.
But yes, if any of those, I mean, and that's just a short list. There's a huge list of these that if you want to look for it yourself, there's a big, long list of different kinds. If anything was off by just a small amount, by these astronomical numbers that we're talking about, life would not be permissible. All right, so Physical necessity. As we discussed before, it seems perfectly possible that any of the constants or quantities could have been different, and that a life-prohibiting universe would result. In fact, it seems more probable that a life-prohibiting universe would exist instead of our universe. No, it seems scientific reason and logic to maintain the hypothesis of physical necessity, not even on the superstring or M theory. If the primordial matter and antimatter had been differently proportioned, if the universe had expanded just a little bit more slowly, if the entropy of the universe were marginally greater, any of these adjustments and more would have prevented a life-permitting universe. Yet all seem perfectly possible physically. The person who maintains that the universe must be life-permitting is taking a radical line which requires a strong amount of evidence, but there is none. This alternative is simply put forward as a bare possibility. So like I said, what I've said before, you can bring up an objection of any kind of objection. You can say, but it's, this is possible, or it's possible it could be, this universe exists necessarily, but there's no evidence of that. You have to, if you're going to make that statement, you have to back it up with something, but there's nothing to back that up with.
This argument is saying that the universe exists necessarily. Is that what this is?
No. This is
no,
saying.
I don't get the physical necessity.
There's three different options, and one option is that this universe exists necessarily, meaning the universe had to come into existence this way. It couldn't have been it. If it was left to its own devices, it couldn't have possibly existed any other way. So we're saying that that option doesn't seem probable.
But there's no reason for this, it's just statement.
Yeah, you can make this objection that it does exist necessarily, but there's no evidence to back this up. You're just making an objection. So that's basically why this is going to go by pretty quick. It's like you can make an objection, but there's really no evidence to back that objection.
So if you make the objection, you're basically going to end up spinning the wheels.
Yeah, if you're going to make the objection, like I said, all physicists see as fine-tuning as a reality. They just try to come up with an explanation. They're trying to come up with a reason why it seems fine-tuned, and that's hard. It's hard outside of the design option.
All right. Now I get it.
All right, so chance. Did this universe just happen by chance? Did we get really, really lucky? One objection is, just as in the lottery, someone has to win. No matter how improbable, some universe must exist, no matter how improbable. What you can say is that with the lottery, the chances of you personally winning are extremely low, but for someone to eventually win, the odds are not nearly as bad. The more you play, the odds of all these different people participating in the lottery, the odds that someone's going to win rises. So the odds of you personally winning is very, very low. But the odds of somebody, if the chances, I think, in the lottery is like 1 in 200 some million or whatever. But if 200 million tickets are bought, then the chances of that, winning number coming up rises dramatically. So the comparison isn't a really good one. What we are saying with fine-tuning of the odds for a life-permitting universe to exist is nearly impossible. We're not trying to explain the existence of our universe, period. We're saying rather it is the existence of a life-permitting universe that demands an explanation. It would be more like a billion black balls mixed with one white ball. And all the black ball means that there's no winner. And it's only played once. So that's what we're saying. It's not really like the lottery. Is that, you understand?
So there's not an infinite number of universes created, there's one.
We'll get to the multiverse first, but right now we're
Just
making the
doing one.
comparison with the lottery right now.
Okay, all right, got it, okay.
All right, so another objection is if the universe weren't fine-tuned, we wouldn't be here to be surprised about it. This is called the anthropic principle, or the anthropic principle. It is true that if there are observers in a universe, it is highly probable that they will observe the constants and quantities of that universe to be finely tuned. Meaning, because there are observers, then life is permitted. So the universe must be observed as finely tuned for their existence, because the odds of a life-permitting universe is nearly impossible. But does that mean we shouldn't be surprised about it? It's not true to claim that it's highly probable that a universe exists which is finely tuned for the existence of the observers within it. So imagine that it has been decided that you will be executed by a firing squad. And there you are standing in front of a row of highly trained marksmen with rifles. The blindfold is placed on you. You hear the commander say, "Ready, aim, fire." And you hear the roaring blasts of gunfire. But you're still alive. Are you surprised that you're currently witnessing yourself as alive? You shouldn't be, as long as your eyes are still functioning properly, right? So the mere fact that you're seeing yourself alive shouldn't be surprising, but the idea that you actually are alive, right? So, do you see the difference? Mm-hmm. It's like a wordplay type thing. So it would be reasonable to conclude that the odds of all these marksmen missing you is nearly impossible. It would be more reasonable to conclude that they missed on purpose instead of just by mere chance. So you understand, like they're trying to make this wordplay, and you're like, it's not exactly that. It's more like this. It's like you're saying, well, we're here, but we shouldn't be surprised that we see it this way. Well, yeah, you shouldn't be surprised that you see it this way, but doesn't mean you shouldn't be surprised that that's the way it is. All right, so the multiverse. There exists a world ensemble of randomly ordered universe, and our world just happens to be one member of the ensemble. Remember, we discussed the multiverse during the Kalam cosmological argument. Does anyone, by chance, remember the objections to the multiverse from the last time? Just out of curiosity. Does anybody remember any of the objections?
Is one that we can't have an infinite number of universes?
Yeah, good.
Okay, remember that
Right, so it's all right.
one. Okay, tell us again.
Any multiverse cannot be past eternal according to what's called this Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem. Meaning, given the vast improbability of a life-permitting universe, it may well be highly improbable that a life-permitted island universe has occurred in the universe at this point. So what this is saying is that any multiverse theory cannot be infinite in the past. Okay? So that means there are not an infinite amount of universes. And if there are not an infinite number of universes, the likelihood of a life-permitting universe is still very unlikely. What we should be observing is a much smaller universe than the universe we actually do see. It is far more likely that a universe the size of our solar system suddenly formed by the random collision of particles. It further faces the Boltzmann brains problem. I don't know if you remember that last time, but it's vastly more probable that you are the result of a single brain, a single observer coming into existence, and all what you see and observe is a figment of your imagination. That all of our astronomical, geological, and biological estimates of the age of our universe are just an illusion. So this is like the idea, I get it, the idea of a single brain, like you being that single observer, and everything around you that you see and observe as an illusion just sounds crazy. But that, if you are bringing in the multiverse, it is far more likely for that to be the truth than what actually we believe is the truth, that we live in this complicated universe with all these different kinds of observers living within. That's much more or less likely.
It's more likely than the one of the multiverses being. I got lost in the.
I don't know if I have that. What you mean what I just said?
Single brain universe is
Well,
more
this is
likely
like the very
than.
on the PowerPoint. It's Boltzmann brains. So
Okay.
the Boltzmann brains, it is vastly more probable that you are the result of a single brain coming into existence, and all of what you see and observe is just a figment of your imagination.
It's more likely than what? Than the multiverse theory?
It's more like, okay, so if what we're saying is like if the multiverse is true, and there are all these different kinds of universes out there, if you got maybe millions or billions or however many you want to say, it's not an infinite amount, but if we're just saying there's a lot of different kinds of universes out there, the chances of what we believe to be true, which is our complicated universe with billions of different observers existing and all this stuff, the likelihood of that universe that we're currently living in is highly, highly, highly unlikely. What's more probable and is what's a lot more simpler is that you alone are a single observer, and everything you do observe is just a figment of your imagination. That's much more simpler universe, and it's much more likely.
Than having the one out of the millions and millions of
Yeah.
possible multiverses life-sustaining.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
All right. So, due to the lack of explanation of how our universe exists, despite the odds, it does not seem that chance is the explanation of the fine-tuning of our universe. So, it seems more true than not that the fine-tuning of the universe is not due to physical necessity or chance. Okay? So therefore, the fine-tuning of our universe is due to design, and if it is due to design, and it requires a designer.
I like that last one, he wants to be found.
That's basically it. Like I said, this is a short one, just because there's just not a lot of objections to it, so we don't have a lot of work to be done to defend it.